Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Connecticut and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a couple of times before. So over the last few weeks I've tried some really nice beers from these guys, a variety of different styles, but from what I've seen so far, these guys have got some really quite nice IPAs and they're also pretty solid when it comes to their lager beers as well actually. We do still need to try a few more malty things from them, but that's what we're going to kind of start on today. So the beer that we're having a look at today is a style that I very much enjoy, one that I don't get to review all that often on the channel, I wish it was more, but it's also one of my favourite German beer styles as well actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Hampden down to New Haven. We're going to go to the eastern part of the city centre, and that means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Armada Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Sorcerer's Temple. It comes in at 5% ABV, and this one is their Dunkel lager. So for those of you who don't know, a Dunkel lager is basically like a mahogany or chestnutty colour lager. The style originates in Germany, but there is a Czech equivalent of this one which is called the Cherny, and the main difference for me is that the German ones are a little bit more kind of clean and they've got a bit more kind of like grainy bread character to them, but the Czech ones are a little bit kind of smoother and the bready character is just that little bit kind of more, it's almost like a little bit creamy actually. The Czech lagers tend to be that little bit more creamy. But yeah, definitely cool to find that these guys had one of them. I love my Dunkel lagers and I just wish there were more of them. But they seem to be, you know, lagers are getting a bit more focus in recent times, which is definitely cool to see. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Armada Brewing Company so far, and we will add more to that list as time goes on if we get the chance. But you can go into the channel homepage as well and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use, you know, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and that is being added to quite regularly at the moment. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, and there are some very, very nice beers that have been reviewed on the channel these days. So do check out those playlists, I would say. But yeah, let's crack on then, and we'll go on to my notes to tell you a wee bit about Armada Brewing once again. So Armada Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in New Haven in Connecticut, and the company was founded back in 2017 by John Kraszewski. So he was inspired to get into brewing beer during his time in Chicago, and he just, you know, he got really immersed in the beer culture of the city. But he ended up working in and then managing alcohol shops and came into contact with many people who now have their own breweries in the city. And then he got into homebrewing himself back in about 2012, and then he started to think about opening up his own brewery in Chicago. But after a visit home, he decided that it would actually be better to take some of that Chicago beer culture back to Connecticut, because the beer scene was very much still in its growth stage here. But they started brewing at Overshores Brewing Company in East Haven, and then they sold their first beers commercially in January of 2017. Over the next few years, John continued to build up the sales portfolio, and he started to plan to have his own facility. And at this time, he was helped very heavily by his partner Alexandra Ivanova, who's still involved heavily in the brewery, along with their daughter Skylar. And they've taken on more staff as time has progressed. But yeah, these guys are they're really nice actually. I got to speak to all of them, in fact, when I was there at the brewery. But in 2022 they opened a new brewery on River Street, and they apparently had a bit of a duel with a filmmaker company called Gigantic to get this property, because they wanted to build a number of sound stages in this district. But there's a tap room downstairs which is called the Throne Room, and then they've also got a larger space upstairs for events which is called the Queen's Lounge, and I got to have a little look at both of these when I was in when I was actually in visiting the brewery. So do check out my out and about video that I did, and then we'll also put an interview up with John later on as well. But the lovely art that you can see on the cans is of course very distinctive. This is the work of Scott Buoncristiano, and the logo, as you can see down here, it's like a ship's bell. So it keeps in with the Armada imagery, and John said that he wanted to basically have an armada of different kinds of beer and things like this. But you can see it's also got the kind of A for Armada, and then you've got the ringer of the bell. It's the hop flower, which is supposed to resonate out to the public. That's the kind of imagery that they want to have. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 70 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And as I've mentioned, they do quite a variety of different styles. They do a lot of different IPAs, different kinds of IPAs for that matter as well, quite a few different lagers, and they do have one or two big heavy darker things in there as well actually. So yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Armada Brewing Company. If you do want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can also check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all those different beers. And if you are interested to hear more about the story, you can have a little look at my interview that I did with John. I'll try and remember to put the link to that in the video description below. Otherwise, just go into the channel homepage and search Armada Brewing and it will pop up. But yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one once again, but I think because it's got that shiny gold thing, the camera's going to hate it. The camera hates it when things are shiny like that. But there you can see, there is the Armada Brewing Company symbol on the bottom there. There you can see Satan coming out of his, or some kind of devil coming out of the portal there that the Sorcerer's conjuring. Where is the Sorcerer? There, he's down there. You can see that. But the artwork, I have to say, is absolutely beautiful. But there you can see plain top on the bottle, plain top on the can there. This is a 473ml can, incidentally, 1 American pint, 16 fluid ounces if you're using the Freedom Unit scale, and yeah, 473ml if you're using the metric system, but which you should do because it's better. But yeah, this one, as we said, it's a 5% Dunkel lager beer, this one. The technical definition of a lager is, of course, a beer that ferments at colder temperatures using a bottom fermenting yeast, usually 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit freedom temperature, but yeah, that's that. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. The Sorcerer's Temple, a Dunkel lager from Armada Brewing in New Haven here in Connecticut. Let's do this. Oh, this does look very nice. So there we are. Let's have a little look at that. So, yeah, this looks good. So before the head disappears, we can see that this beer is poured, and I've poured maybe about 80% of the can. This beer is poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say medium beige coloured head there. You can see medium bubbles on the surface of the liquid, and it gets a little bit foamier the further up you go, but it looks really quite nice actually. In terms of the colour of this one, this is definitely one of the darker Dunkel lagers I've come across actually. This is almost like a little bit more like Doppelbock or even Schwarzbier type colour, so I'm quite curious to see how this is going to be. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One would be the type of malt that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer will affect it as well. But you don't often have to care about that when it comes, pardon me, to Dunkel lagers, to be honest with you. But this is definitely one of the darker ones that I've come across. I mean, this is more, if I shine the light through this, this has got a lovely, very dark, chestnutty type colour to it. It has got a wee hint of, you know, if you put the light through it, it is actually pretty clear, but you're not going to really see that on the camera. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice. As I say, this is just more along the lines of like a Schwarzbier or a Doppelbock colour, to be honest with you. I've not seen a Dunkel this dark in quite a wee while, not that I can remember anyway. So yeah, that is definitely worth bearing in mind with this one. So yeah, let's have a look. I think that's everything we really need to say about the appearance of this one. As I say, just a little bit darker than I would have thought it might have been, But yeah, as long as it tastes good, who cares? That's the main thing. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer then and see what it's all about. I'm very, very curious about this one. Ooh. That's interesting. It's actually a very... I'm getting a lot of like rye bready character out of this one. I'd be very curious to see what the malt base is in this beer as well. But this is definitely one of these Dunkel beers where I could see... I've always said that, you know, a lot of people describe Dunkel and Doppelbock beers as having chocolate in them, and I would quite strongly disagree with that, to be honest. I would always say that it's like a dry brown sugar, but that's just me. For me, this is one of the ones where you maybe could say, yeah, it has got a little bit of like cocoa nib or something like that, and it does potentially have a little bit of that darker chocolate in it. And using chocolate malt, if they have used a little bit of chocolate malt in this, that would maybe explain the colour, to be honest with you. But it does smell pretty nice, actually. It's almost got a very slightly, like a very slight old school kind of English stout aroma to it in a sense. But yeah, so let's break this beer down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer, absolutely you have this little bit of kind of dry rye bready bread crust. That jumps out of the beer right away. So yeah, the rye bready bread crust that comes out of this one, that is the backbone of the beer. There's definitely little elements of kind of woody character in there as well. So yeah, lovely little bit of woodiness for sure. You've also got little bits of nutty character in there as well. But yeah, definitely it's like a slightly toasty, almost well-fired rye bready bread crust that forms the backbone of this beer. Yeah, like a roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust is what's forming the backbone of this beer for me. Then, sort of, yeah, on top of that, you start to get a few different layers of kind of brown bread out of this one. So there's like an oily, almost caramelized rye bread coming out of this one. So that's, yeah, that oily kind of caramelly rye bread is forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you've got like a sweeter pumpernickel type bread coming out of this one, which I think is great. And then, yeah, you've got a little bit more of a, yeah, you've got a little bit more. You've got a little bit more of the kind of brown sugar, I think, coming out of it above that. It's only, I think, you've only really got 2 layers of bready character in this one. But still, it goes together really nicely in that sense. Yeah, so the rye bready base in this one really reminds me of my time in Heidelberg, the German bakeries. I loved them. Then you've got that sweeter pumpernickel. Then, as I say, above that, you start to get the brown sugars. So for me, there's a little bit of like a kind of toasty brown sugary layer, which is great. So a little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugar in there. You've got a more leathery brown sugary character as well. And usually when you've got leathery brown sugars, that's an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil. But I don't know how common it is to use that with German Dunkels. With Doppelbocks, it's certainly common, but not so much with the Dunkels in my experience. But I do wonder if that's maybe a technique that's been employed here, because you can smell there's a little bit of complexity within these brown sugars. So yeah, toasty brown sugar, kind of a more leathery brown sugar as well. And then yeah, above that, you start to get, there's a little bit of a more kind of oily, there's a little bit of a more oily, sweet caramel coming out of this one. So yeah, oily, sweet caramel, and there a little bit of nuttiness and things. And then, yeah, I think that's it. I think, yeah, sweet caramel in the middle, more leathery brown sugars underneath, and then, yeah, a bit of a toasty brown sugar, and just a wee bit of nuttiness mixed in with that. I think that probably describes the malty side of this beer quite well. Yeah, so, on the malty side of things, I don't think we need to say much more, to be honest with you. So, yeah, the hoppy side of things with this beer. So for me, the hoppy side of the beer is quite, it's kind of what you'd expect. I'm pretty sure it's German noble hops in here. Northern Brewer is quite a popular hop to use with Dunkels and Doppelbocks, of course. But you get a little bit of that typical kind of smooth earthiness in there. There's a little bit of herbal character as well. You've got that slightly brighter, so you do have that slightly brighter kind of floral aromatic sort of thing going on. So a lovely little bit of brighter floral aromaticity in here. Bit of a lighter grassiness as well. And then, yeah, I think the way that goes together is pretty damn nice, to be honest with you. The hoppy component just adds that wee bit more complexity to the beer. So, yeah. On top of that, I don't know if there's too much to say about the green component, to be honest with you. I think we've covered that. When it comes to the fruity side of the beer, this one is quite interesting. Like, it has a wee bit of a... It's got a wee bit of like an oily plum, but I do get like a kind of juicy figgy character out of it as well, and some black currants. But the fruity side of the beer, it only really comes out when you sugar the beer up that little bit more, to be honest with you. So that, for me, is a really interesting point to make about this one. Yeah, it really kind of just shows you that little bit more sharpness. Has maybe got a very slight touch of like phenol to it, you know, that sort of cough syrupy medicinal type thing. You find that more in Belgian doubles and stuff like that, and that's usually a product of the fact, the mixture of the yeast and the kind of candy sugar that they use in those beers. But yeah, the aroma that you get out of this one, I think, is really quite nice. Yeah, aroma wise, that goes together really quite well. So yeah, slightly different from other Dunkels I've had. Maybe a little bit kind of richer and darker in its aroma, but still, I think it goes together quite nicely. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time just to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Sorcerer's Temple, a 5% Dunkel lager, our fourth or maybe fifth beer actually, that I'm reviewing on the channel here, from Armada Brewing in New Haven. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. That's pretty damn good, actually. Ooh. That is nice. I'm going to say straight away, it gets a thumbs up from me. And like I said, this is one of my favourite German styles. It is one that I enjoy. And I will say, it almost straddles the line between like Schwarzbier and Dunkel, but it just stays on the Dunkel side. But it does certainly have a little bit of Schwarzbier element to it. Yeah, this is quite nice. So gets a thumbs up from me. Definitely, if I think about it in the context of a Dunkel, it's definitely one of the more roasty and toasty and dry Dunkels that I've come across. But it does show you the sweetness up front, which is what makes it the Dunkel. If I think about it in the context of the Czech Tmavy as well, it's too clean. It is too clean to be a Czech Tmavy. It's not quite kind of creamy enough, I would say, to go into the Czech category. It has a too clean a mouthfeel, I think, is probably fair to say. But I like that. Certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. I'll say that straight away. And it is pretty damn easy to drink that too. So, yeah. Let's break this beer down then and just describe the flavour a wee bit more kind of in depth for you. So, the middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer is this roasty, toasty, almost slightly well-fired rye bready bread crust. That is the backbone of your beer. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you've got a little bit of woodiness in there, and a little bit of nuttiness for sure. So yeah, definitely a little bit of woodiness in there, a little bit of nuttiness, and yeah, on top of that, you start to get the kind of more bready characters out of this one. As you go further into the aftertaste, you do get a wee bit more of the woodiness and a wee bit of the kind of nuttiness in there, which is great. And then, yeah, on top of that, yeah, you've got this rye bready character, which does feel a little bit sort of like caramelized or something, but at the same time, it does feel, a little bit dry in a sense too. So above that, you can feel there's a slightly lighter and more airy, but still quite sweet, like German pumpernickel bread. So yeah, the bready layers that you get in this beer are really quite nice, actually. Yeah, the way this one goes together, I think is really nice, and as I say, it gets a big thumbs up from me. On the malty side of things, then, or on the sweeter side of things, with the malty side, I should say, for me, the malty side of this, the sweeter side of this beer, sorry, on top of the kind of pumpernickel bread, you get this toasty, brown sugary type character there. And you could be forgiven, I should also point out as well, you could be forgiven, if we ignore the brown sugar for the moment, if you go to the back of that middle third of your palate, you could kind of be forgiven for thinking there's a bit of like cocoa nib or something in there. So yeah, above the kind of, the pumpernickel-y bready sort of note, you get that roasty, toasty, brown sugary character in there, which is great. So yeah, roasty, toasty, brown sugar. Then you've got a circle in the middle of your palate, which is a little bit more of a kind of leathery brown sugar for sure. So yeah, more oily, kind of leathery brown sugar in there, which makes me wonder, is there a little bit of a longer wort boil going on here? That would also explain a bit of the darker colour of this one. Yeah, toasty brown sugar, the kind of leathery circle, and if you go into the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of it's got a bit of sweet caramel there, but it's also a little bit more like treacly or molassesy. It feels as if it's a little bit more kind of caramelised or something. Then above everything else, there's a little bit of like a kind of biscuity, cookie type character coming out of the beer, which is also really quite nice. So that gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I do like how that pieces together, actually. So, in terms of the middle third of your palate, I think we said everything we need to. Let's go to the back third of the palate. Remember that general trend with your tongue, though, that sweeter flavours come out further forward, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back, and also the back third of your palate is going to give you similar flavours to the middle third of your tongue, just at different intensities. So yeah, the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust is in the base there. You can feel there's a little bit of an almost like crackery layer above it there, which is kind of drier too. But then you've got the rye bready layer, which feels but definitely a bit lighter, more airy and drier. Then you've got the pumpernickel bread above it, which is a little bit sweeter but still kind of drier. And then you can feel the toasty brown sugars. Just you can feel the kind of toasty brown sugars just creeping over the top there as well. But then the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel there's the rye bread in the base, the sweeter bread on top, and then you get some of the kind of cocoa nibby type notes coming out of this one, which is good. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense I think is really quite nice. I do like how that pieces together in this one, so that gets a thumbs up from me. On top of everything else on that back third of the palate, you start to get some of the yeasty character out of this beer, and you get more and more of that into the aftertaste. So the yeasty note for me is like this really dense, kind of sweeter leaning, rye bready type character. So yeah, sweet, dense, kind of rye bready character in there. On top of that kind of dense thing, you get a little bit of there is a little bit of a kind of bread crusty spiciness there, and then it's kind of wrapped in a bit of honeycomb. So I do like how that goes together. And yeah, the way that this one goes together in that sense is really nice. But definitely, back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really, really nice. Yeah, hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gets a little bit herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, it's definitely a little bit more kind of floral and grassy, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it is, it's more floral and aromatic there, but then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more oily and grassy. I think that covers the green component. The green component is quite oily on this one, but you do tend to find that with more malty beer styles, of course. But let's have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of kind of bready build up in there. The base of that build up is more rye bread, then it's wholemeal bread above that. The base of the the front third of your palate, you get the toasty bread crust again. The rye bread is there. There is a wee bit of the sweeter bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer is kind of interesting. There's a wee bit at the back of that front third of your palate. There's a little bit of a kind of plummy note in there. There's maybe a little bit of like date or something underneath that, and the datey character kind of spreads further forward a bit. As you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, it's a kind of like oily, figgy type character. So yeah, you've got a little bit of plum, a little bit of datey note, juicy kind of figgy character in there as well. Then as you move further forward, you get a wee bit of more, yeah, you definitely get a little bit more of a kind of blackcurranty type character coming out of this beer. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. So that gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, on the, yeah, I think if we look at the, if we have a little look at the very kind of front tip of your tongue, yeah, there's a wee bit of blackcurrant in there. And I want to say there's maybe just a wee touch of like sultana or something comes out of it into the aftertaste. So yeah, plum, date, maybe a little bit of sultana, fig and blackcurrant. I think that's a good descriptor of the fruity character that's coming out of this beer. But yeah, let's have a little look at the mouthfeel then, just to round off this review. So for me, mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer, it's definitely kind of it's definitely kind of top end of light bodied, bottom end of mid bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It actually gets more slick and more oily as it warms up and as you drink more of it, I would say. IBU wise, we have to talk about perceived bitterness and calculated bitterness here. I think it's probably meant to be about 20-25 IBUs in the calculation, but the beer does actually have a bit of dryness and roastiness into the aftertaste that you have to consider. So that could make it feel a little bit more bitter than it actually is. But yeah, the maltiness, as we said, roastiness underneath, smoothness in the middle, bit of kind of sweetness on top, quite a dry sweetness with a bit of toastiness as well. Then you've got that lovely oily fruity character coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think is really quite nice. It's a very nice example of the Dunkel style, and as I say, it's one of the slightly drier and more roasty examples of a Dunkel I've had. It straddles the border with being a Schwarzbier in some sense, but still it is quite nice. It's just a little bit, and it's a little bit too clean to be a Czech Cherny, as we said earlier too. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Sorcerer's Tempo, a Dunkel lager at 5% ABV. Another very nice beer from Armada Brewing in New Haven in Connecticut. So let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Armada Brewing Company as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point soon. I do have one more can, I think, from these guys that I'll need to have a look at before I leave the US. But this was a really quite nice one. So, yeah, let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my social media, check out Armada Brewing Company's social media, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.